From the studios of the Optimism Institute, welcome to the Blue Sky Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Burke, and in every Blue Sky episode, we'll be speaking to leaders, researchers, and thinkers whose stories and insights will remind us that there is always blue sky above. Sometimes you just have to get your head above the clouds to see it. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus is credited with the idea that the only constant in life is change. Points to me for coming in hot with Greek philosophy right here at the top of the episode. But this line is very appropriate for the blue sky conversation you're about to hear with my guest, Kate Bean. Change has been such a constant in her life that she's decided to dedicate this next chapter to guiding others through their own life transitions. As you'll soon hear, Kate Bean became a fellow at Harvard's Advanced Leadership Initiative after serving 18 years as the founder and CEO of Aveson, a nonprofit organization built to manage charter schools and lead a national movement of personalized K-12 public education. More recently, as the founder and CEO of iChangeCourse, Kate is leading a new movement of embracing change as the catalyst for possibility through coaching, consulting, and speaking engagements. She's recently written a book chronicling her road trip across the United States in a converted cargo van, hoping to find herself by losing herself in service. On her journey, she discovered the power of embracing change and noticing the extraordinary in every ordinary moment. Kate Bean herself is extraordinary, and I hope you enjoy this blue sky conversation with her as much as I did. Kate Bean, welcome to the Blue Sky Podcast.
Hey, Bill. I'm happy to be here.
I am thrilled to have you on, and this is going to be a far-reaching conversation because that's the way your life has been. You described somewhere, I think, that you're living your life now with your eyes and your mind wide open. But if someone looks at your bio and your upbringing, you might think you grew up in a place where not everyone probably had their eyes and their mind wide open, very small town. Can you describe your early days and your upbringing?
Yeah, I grew up in a small, I guess you'd have to call it a Mormon town because it was so small, 1,500 people right on the border of Arizona and Utah. So the influence, of course, was predominant, well, almost the entire town was Mormon or Latter-day Saint.
So this would be late 60s, early 70s. The Mormon church nowhere near as big as it is now, and with pretty strict confines about conduct and how you live your life and that sort of thing. Were you sort of all in growing up with the church?
You know, we actually moved there in 1974. So I actually was born in Key West, Florida. My dad was in the Navy. We moved to California. So it wasn't really until the fourth grade that I moved to the small Mormon town called Fredonia, Arizona. So it was a little culture shock for me. My family was not really active in the church too much before we moved there.
Okay.
So moving there just became all in.
Yes.
You know, everyone in the town was Mormon. And so my dad had a local business. So I think strategically it was smart for him to be more involved. And that is when, we became more active in the church.
And you followed what I assume would have been a pretty traditional path going to Brigham Young University from your hometown.
I did. I had scholarships to other universities. And looking back on it now, I'm wondering if, you always wonder if it's the right choice. But I am of the belief now that everything happens exactly how it's supposed to. It's just whatever story you tell yourself. So I did. I went to Brigham Young University. All three of my older brothers had gone there, so it felt comfortable to me at the time. And I ended up walking on the softball team. So
wow.
I played for 3 years, and it was a great experience. It found sometimes in a big university where I never really felt plugged in to being a Mormon.
Yes.
But I did find my team and
right.
my community on the softball team.
And it was in high school or middle school, you started to have the stirrings of I guess, if you will, a sexual awakening, that your sexual orientation might not quite align with the Mormon church. And I believe that was a big part of why you mentioned 3 years at BYU. You decided it wasn't going to be the right place for you and you transferred. Can you describe that for what that was like for you?
Yeah. So in high school, I'd never, there was I write about this in my book. There's somebody I looked up to. She was 3 years older than me, and there was when she graduated high school. I was just a freshman in high school, and she came out to me in her senior year on a late night bus trip back from a softball game, and so I didn't know what to do with that. But at the time, I realized that I had started to think about who I was and how I was feeling, and it took a while. It wasn't until I actually went to Brigham Young that I finally figured out that I was gay or lesbian. And even that was quite a process, as you can imagine,
Sure.
being at Brigham Young. So once I realized, wow, I don't think this is the right place for me, I decided, where better to go than California. So
Right.
that's what I did. I transferred schools and ended up in Southern California in Los Angeles.
Well, I think for younger people listening, or even people our age, we're roughly the same age, it's important to remember, too, set aside the differences within the Mormon church, the differences you might have had. At that time in America, it was much less common to be comfortable and out. I mean, much less from my recollection. So you were really on doing some pretty courageous things, going out to California and coming out the way you did.
Thank you. I think it probably sounds a little more courageous than it was. Once I got there, I was finishing school, but it took me meeting someone who was just kind of larger than life, and she pretty much just dragged me right out of that closet. And but I look back on it now, and this is so true, which I believe with change is that it's just the best thing that ever happened to me. I mean,
Sure.
Being gay, being lesbian, just opened up my whole world, and not just in romantic relationships, but just my view of being someone who was different, and what is that like to be different in the world. And so to me, yeah, it really is the best thing that ever happened to me.
So somewhere in your path, you took on a keen interest in education and eventually went on to found your own charter school company. Can you talk about why education? What brought you to that? Because any startup takes a huge amount of passion and commitment. So can you talk about the roots of that and then what you created? Do you pronounce it Aveson, the charter school company?
It's actually Aveson. And
Aveson. Thank you.
Yeah, right there sums up why I did it. So Aveson is a combination of my two daughters' names. So I have Avery and I have Addison. So AVE, I took 3 from one, and then SON from Addison, so it became Aveson. And so education, I kind of fell into education. I wasn't going to be a teacher, but ended up just coming right out of college, going right into teaching, because they were offering at the time in Los Angeles Unified to just get your credential and jump right in. And I did. I went in and out of teaching over the years, became a consultant, an educational consultant for several years. And once my oldest daughter, Addison, has neurodiversity, and my wife and I at the time were thinking about where she could go to school, and I just literally couldn't find the right school for her. So, and I just thought, I know really good people, and I know what schools should look like. And I also realized nobody was personalizing education. So I pulled a few people together and said, hey, I think we could start a school, or a couple of them, and we could really personalize education. So we really piloted, and there were very few people in the country doing this, but we piloted what was called personalized mastery learning. So we just believed every kid should have a personalized model. Just because they're the same age, they shouldn't be sitting in the same lesson at the same time with every kid, because we know kids are so very, from your own children, my children, they're so different. So that's what we did. We started, we started a workers cooperative, which was an educational cooperative, the first in California. And that cooperative started a nonprofit called Aveson. And Aveson started 2 charter schools, a K through 5 and then a 6 through 12, which I went on to run as the CEO for 13 years.
Okay, so let's go back. So there are a lot of people whose kids might be having struggles in school or concerns that every parent worries about their kid at some level. It takes a very special person to then say, you know what, I think we should start a whole new set of schools. What do you think? What is it about you that said, okay, I'm a teacher now, but forget that. I'm going to do something much bigger. Where is that drive coming from?
Oh, that's funny. Some may say special. Some may say clueless. I had no idea what I was getting into. But
yes,
I think, as strained as my relationship was with my dad growing up, which is a whole chapter of the book, he was an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And I think the one thing I did get from my dad was that entrepreneurial spirit, that idea that more of a why not versus a why attitude to life. And so for me, that along with, I didn't really love working for other people. That didn't always go well for me. And having a daughter, right, who really needed a personalized model. It was everything I needed. And I loved working on team. And I had these great people in my life who had consulted with me in 2 different companies. So we just said, let's do it. We can do this. We raised some money. We got a Gates Foundation grant. We got another federal grant. And we just didn't know what we didn't know. Sometimes that's good. But I'll tell you, Billy, it is not a good business model, taking people's most cherished possessions.
Yes.
And trying to not only teach them, but teach them in a personalized way and teach them social leadership and healthy living, which were other tenets that we had. It's a tough model.
Yes.
But luckily I had amazing people. I have one talent, Bill, and that's finding really, really good people.
Yes.
And so though that team of people, we didn't know what personalized learning looked like, but we made it happen. And we just literally, as the saying goes, built a plane while we were flying it. And it was very successful. We had a lot of wait lists. A lot of people asked us to scale, but that wasn't our goal. Was not to scale to many charter schools. Our goal was to have a lab and a place where people could come and see what personalized mastery learning looked like. What does it look like to create a place where every kid is seen fully and are taught exactly where they need to be?
Incredible. So you mentioned being there 13 years. So roughly what year would this have been when you started this?
We opened the doors in 2007.
Okay, so you did that work straight through until what we're about to talk about next. Was your daughter, had she already moved on, or was she able to actually attend one of these schools?
It was great. So my daughter was so I started planning for the schools when she was going into kindergarten. So by the time, so because I couldn't find the school, right? But it took a couple of years, of course, to open schools. Yeah. And by 2007, she was going into 2nd grade. So she was in the inaugural 2nd grade class. And then my next daughter, Avery, had one more year before kindergarten. So she came into kindergarten our 2nd year of operations. So
amazing.
it was amazing to have them. My oldest daughter went straight through all the way and graduated from Aveson. My next daughter, which I also write about in the book, she had a little different idea once she got to 9th grade, and she was into the arts, and she's like, hey, Mom, love your school, but I'm going somewhere else for high school, which I was like, all right, that's fair. You teach kids to have a voice in their own learning, you have to listen to it.
I was going to say, she grew up around you, so why you think she would just follow whatever path you prescribed? You know, you probably saw that coming.
Fair enough.
Kate Bean took quite the personal journey from an upbringing in a small Arizona town to attending and then leaving BYU early, marrying, having 2 children, and founding the Aveson schools in support of their unique learning needs. Creating an educational startup is incredibly ambitious. And while not every optimist is an entrepreneur, every entrepreneur, I believe, has to be an optimist. Her schools were a big success, and getting back to our conversation, I asked Kate what made her decide to step aside from this work.
I think there was a confluence of things. First of all, I'd taken that first kindergarten class all the way through graduation. And from our first 30 kids in kindergarten, 4 of them went the whole route. So when I saw that coming, and so that was, 2020, and I'm like, oh, maybe it's time for me to graduate and move on to something else.
Right,
and so,
right.
And so that was one thing. Another is I had a pretty tough health issue back in 2016. Basically, it really kind of cracked me open to thinking about who am I and what do I want separate from who I was for these schools. Being the CEO of charter schools, with 150 employees and 900 students and thousands of parents, I kind of lost myself a little bit. And so that really got me on a more, I don't want to use the word spiritual path, but definitely a path of mindfulness of who am I separate from what I do. And so in February 2020, I had this lightning bolt go off in my head that it was time to move on And I told my board in 2020 that I'll be stepping down as CEO. And of course, that was 2020. So a month later, we closed our doors for the pandemic. And the board asked me, they said first, of course, you're not leaving. And I said, oh, I am.
Good for you.
But I will stay on to train up new leadership for another year. This was not the right time to leave everything hanging in the balance. So I did stay on, but I demoted myself to a director of growth and sustainability role. And then I stayed on for a year just to support through that. And during that time, I started dreaming up new ideas, Bill. It never stops. So I just started thinking about what do I want to do next? And the ideas started coming.
It's an amazing confluence of things because anyone who hears February 2020 thinks, wow, that's right before the pandemic. Pandemic hits, and every bit of society was disrupted, none more so than schools. So I can only imagine what that was all like. And I can only imagine the board saying, please don't leave now, but you had your mindset on something else. And a lot of us with that time were thinking deep thoughts while we binged TV and did other things. So let's talk about Sojourner and the van trip and changing course. How did that all come about? Describe to us, if you would, just sort of as you thought those deep thoughts, where does a van come in and that whole journey?
Yeah, so I, announcing to the board I'm stepping down, I had no idea what I was going to do. So a few things happened during the pandemic. One was we were still, even though our schools were closed, we were still feeding children. And when I'd run the schools, I'd started, Healthy Living was one of our premises. So I had started a food service program at the schools, and we actually fed 2 other charter schools. So we not only fed our students, but we fed 2 other, kind of that entrepreneurial. It was a way we could, economy of scale, make sure we could offer
is
really
that breakfast,
healthy.
lunch, after school, everything?
Breakfast and lunch to all our students, and we wanted to do a really healthy program. So we needed the 2 other contracts to make it work. And so, with that said, once the pandemic hit, they just opened it. They just opened it up. They said you can feed any child who will show up to pick up food at your school. They don't even have to go to your school during the pandemic.
Wow.
So we immediately pivoted. I don't know if I'm breaking the rules, and I don't think the government can come after me now. But instead of people coming up every day to pick up breakfast and lunch for their kids, I said, let's just create a weekly meal pack. And so we did that. And so we actually, with the money we were given, we were able to put in quite a bit of food that could probably feed more than one student, which we thought was great during the pandemic. So food insecurity became really important for me. And I started volunteering all throughout the pandemic. I was volunteering at testing sites and food pantries and food banks. And so for me, I knew that I wanted to do more work in that. I also needed a COVID project, all those hours at home. And so my daughter had sent me a TikTok about this woman converting a van into a tiny home, a cargo van into a tiny home. So I'm like, that's interesting. I don't really need to stay around California anymore. My youngest daughter was heading off to college. There's another change, empty nesting, which we could talk about.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing holding me here. I want to go. I'd really love to get out and see the country. I'd love to meet people different from me. I've been a West Coaster or in the West my whole life. I was really sick of this red-blue divide that was happening in the country. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I just want to meet people. I want to go especially into the South, which I have never spent any time. So all these things came together in me purchasing a cargo van, planning hours and hours of watching YouTube videos on how to convert it, and creating a spreadsheet with all the things I'd need and how I would do it and drawing it out. And then I called my brothers. I have 3 brothers in Utah, and I had not lived, in Utah for some time, 30 years. Yeah. And I said, hey bros, let's, what if I move to Utah after I actually am done with Aveson in July 2021? And would you mind if I use your tools, your space, and a little bit of your expertise to help me build out a van into a tiny home? Because I'm just going to travel around the country for a year. And my goal was to be out by my birthday, January 2022. And so I went off to Utah to build a tiny home and started to get ready to set course.
When your daughter sent you that TikTok, was it just here's a fun TikTok, or was she thinking, this could be cool for you to do, Mom.
Yeah, I probably had mentioned that I wanted to go on a journey, and I didn't know if it would just be traveling around hotels or something. And I think she had the intuition. I think she also had the intuition. Avery is very intuitive, that I needed to do something, like physically do something to separate myself. She had watched me all those years running Aveson. I think she knew I needed to actually have a project to do in order to make that separation before I took off on my journey.
A profound difference, though. I was thinking about any startup is hard work. And you mentioned staff and all that. And then you mentioned thousands of parents. Running a school, I have a wife who was on a local school board, and you don't know what it's like unless you're in the middle of all that and the demanding parents. So you went from that day to day to this idea of being off on your own in a van. And you mentioned earlier a wife. So you were divorced at that point. You're on your own. You're becoming an empty nester. So life is really changing for you as you make these decisions.
Yeah, you spin that change roulette wheel, Bill, and I was hitting a lot of them. I'd empty nesting.
Yes.
I'd gone through a personal illness. I was leaving my career, divorce, and so yeah, it just seemed like let's double down on change. Like literally, I thought I'm just going to go on this journey where I change almost every day, from place to place to place, meeting new people. And that Gandhi quote, it really inspired me. The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself through the service of others. And so I just thought they just all came together. Like it just seemed like this is exactly where I'm supposed to go. And I just trusted that if I lean into that change, if I was going to learn a lot from it. It became I was really planning my own virtual gap year, which I always suggested to seniors at my school. I always thought a gap year between high school and college would be great. This was my, Bill, I was born January 1965. That makes me the very first month of the first year of Generation X, right?
Is that when it was? I have the worst time keeping this all straight. So my birthday, give people some ideas for shopping and timing. I'm a January 1st, 66. So first in my hospital, that sort of thing. So you and I are just Generation X?
Generation X. And I could see that I was on the leading edge of all those changes that Generation X, so I feel like I'm literally forging the journey, right? So yes. I thought, let's head out and let's do it. And so that's what happened. Now, while I was building my van, I ended up having an accident. I ended up falling out of the van, which was a whole story about not slowing down and being mindful. And I had to have surgery on my Achilles. So what happened? So during that time, though, I had this moment of, laying in my brother's basement, and my brother and sister-in-law were amazing as they took care of me, just amazing. But I thought, this is not what I planned. So change just was forced upon me, or I stepped out wrong. But I thought, what can I control? And this is where I started to think about this idea of extraordinary, ordinary moments. That when things don't go according to plan, when change hits you, instead of being in resistance, sometimes you just have to look around for the small things, the ordinary moments that actually are extraordinary. And they're extraordinary, Bill, because you see them. But they're extraordinary, even the tough times when you notice that you're extremely sad, but you also notice that it does pass. So it's the noticing of the ordinary moments that make them extraordinary. And it took me weeks of recuperating. And what I watched and noticed is that my brothers just took over. My brother Jeff took over finishing the van, because I thought there's no way now. I'm not going out by my birthday, 2022. There's no way.
Right.
My brother Jeff and his wife Allison took over and literally finished. It was amazing. And they all came together. Everybody came together and made it happen. So I was out on the road January 2022.
Yeah, it's amazing. Back to what I said about optimism, one of the things I think that gets in people's way of being optimistic or being hopeful is they don't like change, and something happens that just sends them into a spiral, or they fall out of the van and rip their Achilles, and that's enough of that. I guess, or just go into this self-pity. You're just not wired that way, it seems. And I think your message that we'll talk about some more is really valuable to people, because it's the old, the only thing predictable about life, or that's always there, is change. And so how we face that can really impact our overall outlook.
Exactly. Exactly.
It was courageous enough to start brand new schools. Adding the food service element made that work even more ambitious. And it's amazing to see how that infrastructure and experience helped Kate make the shift during the COVID pandemic to serve food to people in need across her community. And her daughter seemed to know enough about her mom's adventurous spirit to send her that TikTok video about converting a van. And the work she did there helped bring her closer to her brother as she focused on her next adventure after leaving Aveson. And in the next phase of her life, Kate Bean will truly live by Gandhi's encouragement that the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. I'd also like to add that a great tool in an Optimist kit is remembering to focus on what we can control. Life gets a lot more difficult when we obsess about challenges that we have no ability to change. Now, back to our conversation. So let's talk about this trip, because a lot of us are thinking, boy, that'd be really cool. So how much of it was sort of planned out? How much of it was serendipity? How much, and a really interesting driver and thread through all this was service. So you're not just going out to, look at the Grand Canyon. You're going to go someplace and work in soup kitchens and that sort of. Describe how you plan this and sort of what the drivers of your plan were.
Well, the plan was to not have a plan. And I appreciate that you said it seems like it comes naturally with change, but I actually grew up, with a lot of chaos in my life due to my dad's constant changing. And I was pretty much a control freak. Again, until I had that health issue in 2016, I was very much about control. So this was new for me. So I purposely went out on the road without a plan. I knew two things. I knew that I wanted to serve. So I knew I'd be in cities mostly, right? I wasn't really out to just adventure all of the, national parks and all that sort of thing. I was looking for service. So I knew there were food banks and food pantries everywhere coming out of the pandemic.
Sure.
Right? So I knew that, and I could always look ahead to the next place. And I had another thing, which was called Harvest Hosts. It's this great thing. If anybody's traveling the country in a tiny home, it's you can map out your route, and for a subscription, which is very minimal every year, you get to stay for free, just for one night at a time, at all kinds of amazing places, wineries,
Really?
farms, restaurant parking lots, people's driveways. So I would look ahead, like, okay, in 2 days, I'll be in, let's say, San Antonio, or then where's the food bank or food pantry? Call them or go online and sign up to volunteer. And then I would find along the way, and when I got there, somewhere on Harvest Host to stay. So I think, I rarely ever paid for any place. Of course, my van was totally, tricked out.
Yeah,
Bill. I
had
had solar panels on top. I had 500 amps of lithium battery. I had a shower. I had everything I needed. So you needed to be self-contained to do this. So that's what was it. I never stayed more than 1, 2, maybe 3 nights in any given place.
So you pull into, say, San Antonio. Hi, I'm Kate. I'm here to help. You go to the food pantry, work there a day or two, meet people, record. As I recall, too, you're recording this journey for posterity, hopefully, or at least banking memories as you go. Is that a good way to describe it?
That's exactly right. I had a good friend back home, Tom Hyatt, and he became kind of a home base for me. He just pushed me, like, record, do video. And I go, why would I do that? I'm just trying to be present. I want to just notice the extraordinary, ordinary moments of every day. And he's like, but capture them in voice recordings, capture them in writing, capture them with video. So I did. And he loved putting videos together. So he did a few of those for me. So that's what my days were like, Bill. I'd show up to a place, volunteer. I loved interviewing people. Like, why do you do service? What does this do for you? And the stories were incredible. I would meet the most amazing people. And between Harvest Host and the volunteering, I would meet people that later down the road, I ended up staying with them at their house. Like, I volunteered for 3 weeks in Alice, Texas to build a house for Habitat for Humanity. The people I met there, like lifelong friends now, it was just amazing. A harvest host outside of Tucson. I meet this amazing couple that lives in Pennsylvania. And they're like, when you come through Pennsylvania, stay with us. This just kept happening to me, Bill, everywhere. And all through, especially all through the South. I mean, Southern hospitality is a real thing.
Yep.
People were so kind to me. I don't know if it was because I was a single female traveling. I don't know, because I met people mostly either giving up their driveways or farms for me to stay, or I met them, doing service. Maybe that was part of it.
Sure.
But overall, Bill, people are people. And
Yeah.
the values we share and the commonalities far outweighed any differences of red state, blue state. Here I was, a liberal lesbian from the West Coast,
Yes.
traveling around in a van.
Yes.
And did I come out to every person I met? Maybe not, on the back end of a property
Right.
of somebody who in Alabama where, and I could tell he was
Yeah.
a little gruff. And
Yeah.
when I heard I was from California, he didn't like it.
Yeah.
So I didn't come out to everyone.
Right.
But I can tell you I did to quite a few people, and it opened up great conversations but more similarities than differences, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad, because I wanted to come back a little bit to the red blue, because that was part of your motivation for this trip, was exposing yourself to different kinds of people. And I've talked to others on this show about this notion of if you start every conversation, which we often do, going to our differences, it's an awful conversation. If you start by laying out all the ways in which we're similar or we agree, and so let's talk about education. So everyone wants their kids to have a good education. Everyone wants their kid to be safe. Everyone wants to have breakfast and lunch. You have this list of things, and then if you get it done with that, and then you start with your differences, you realize those are the exceptions, and it's a much better way to take on the world, I think, or to take on conversations. It sounds like you were able to do that on this trip, and lean into the hospitality and all these things you had in common before if you ever start talking about politics or who you're going to vote for in November and that sort of stuff.
100%. And it was a year. It was my gap year of opening my eyes and my heart. It was a year of saying yes and thank you. So many people were so kind and helpful, and I just needed to say thank you. Like, it was that simple, right? Didn't have to get into tough conversations with some people, and other people we did, but we were able to find our way through it. So really, really lucky to have that time.
How did you know the trip was over? Did you have an end date when you started, or did you just say, you know what, okay? When was it over, and how did you know?
Well, that's a great question. My journey started off in Utah with my brothers and bonding in ways that we hadn't in years and years and years. And I didn't know it, but my trip was going to end in Utah too. So I meant to be out for a year, but by the time I would hit the Eastern Seaboard, seaboard and up to New York. When I was in New York, staying with these people that I met, as we built a house for Habitat, I got a call from my brothers, and my dad had been in a facility for a while, and his health was declining. And I got a call that it was time to get back, that I needed to get back to Utah quickly. And so I took off. So instead of, staying out the other 6 months, it took me a few days to get back across the country. And I got there to be with my 3 brothers 2 hours before my dad passed away.
Wow.
And which was mixed feelings. There
Sure.
were many, many years that I was estranged from my dad for various reasons. But being there with my brothers and together, and also, when I was there building the van, I was able to do I had done a lot of repair with my dad 3 years before, even
Okay.
going on the journey. So it was just important. It was important for us to be together. And my dad is a character, and he left quite a mess for all of us, literally. I don't think he ever threw one thing away. So it took us 3 months of me living back in Utah to kind of sort out his life. But during that time, of course, I'd already found my next thing, as you know, and why you and I met, Bill. But I knew where I was heading. By that time, I was just learning that I'd be heading, back east for this program at Harvard called the Advanced Leadership Initiative. So I had a vision, I had a plan. I knew I was off the road, which there was some sadness about that. but I knew where I was heading next.
One of the ways Kate Bean decided she'd make the most out of her trip was to travel to places that were different from what she'd come to know. As a self-described liberal from California, heading to more conservative parts of the U.S. South was an important objective for her. And there she found people who demonstrated gracious hospitality and reminded her that despite whatever political differences we might have, in the end, as she says, people are people. And getting to know them through service for others created lifelong friends and many positive memories for Kate. And she emerged a better person after spending what she describes as, quote, a year of saying please and thank you. And now to kick off our final segment, I asked Kate to tell us what she had hoped to gain from an academic fellowship after her year-long adventure in a van.
For me, I felt like I had this amazing gap year to look at change, right? And I started to think about, I mentioned before, that roulette wheel of change, right? And so I had experienced so many of them. I was looking at now all my cohort mates who were experiencing so many of the same exact ones. It started to come to me, and this mantra started coming to me around change. Like change is going to happen to especially Gen Xers, right? Like, buckle up, here we go. It's going to happen to you, and you can either choose it, which sometimes you have, and sometimes it's forced upon you. And we're going to experience both. And I had a year of just leaning in, not being in resistance to change, and I learned so much. So things started to percolate, and this idea of noticing my cohort mates, and I thought, oh, this is what I want to do. I want to help other people. I want to help shepherd people into that next chapter of their life. Now, specifically, my focus is on Gen Xers, right? And maybe early baby, boomers. But I do think this is true for anybody. I think change happens to everyone, and next chapter can happen no matter where you are. There comes a point in your life where you need to reimagine, rebuild, re-envision your life. And I thought, I want to do this. And so things started coming up for me, and these words started. I thought, well, at least I need to capture my journey. So I started to write the book, and it became a series of 10 essays about my trip. And I realized that I was on a journey, and everyone is. Life is a journey, right? For all of us. I took a specific journey, but we're all on this journey. And then, so I was thinking, life is a journey. And really, where's the destination of that journey? For me, it was every extraordinary, ordinary moment that I could just notice. That's what I could control. I couldn't always control the big changes. I couldn't control that I fell out of the van, but I could control noticing ordinary moments in my life. And the noticing was the extraordinary part. So if the destination is now, if life is a journey and the destination is now, what's the vehicle? Yes, I had a tiny home in a cargo van, but that was not the vehicle. To me, the vehicle is change. Change is the vehicle. So if life is a journey and you're just moving along, you're on autopilot, heading down the highway, change is like the best speeding ticket ever. And because it just stops you, right? It slows you down. It makes you look around for a minute and say, oh, I missed all this stuff on the road. I wouldn't have seen it if change didn't happen to me. And then the destination, I like to say, is now, because you can only control just the next right thing, right? You can only control the next step, the next action. You really, if you think you can control it all, change is going to come right along again, right? And pop right in. So what I do want to say, though, and I want to be really clear with this, when I just said, oh, we all have this power of choice in each moment, that power of choice in the now. When I say that, it is not lost on me, my privilege, right? I had the privilege of being able to borrow against my retirement during COVID, buy a van, travel around, end up at Harvard. Not everybody has a privilege when change hits them to have very many choices at all. Like, I have quite a few choices, and I usually have resources and people in my life. Not everybody can do that, but we do at least have the power of the story of what, and maybe we have the power to do one next thing. And so we might not have the power to really change everything or to go in a direction, but I do think we have the power of choice in the now. And, it may go back to like Viktor Frankl's, man's search for meaning, but all you really have is the story you're going to tell yourself in the moment, and then decide what's the next thing. So that's how this started to evolve as I was talking to people, and then the book, and then from the book, this framework came up, and it was just called, and I've just created this notice framework. So NOTICE, I've just broken it down. Some might say it's an acrostic poem. I would say, I guess it's an acronym, but it really just, the N is just name the change. So when something happens to you, like either you've made the change, which Bill, sometimes even when you make the choice of a change, it's still hard. Like even if it wasn't forced upon you. But the N is just name the change. Just name it. Like, oh, well, that happened. Right. And the O is if you'll just open up to possibility. Like, I wonder what this is supposed to mean for me. The T is try being curious. Start all the what ifs. Well, what if this change actually change? What if I'm actually supposed to learn something by having my Achilles, blown out? And what if I'm supposed to notice that my family showed up for me? What if? So try being curious with the T, right? Yeah. The I is identify what's true for you. So of all the what ifs and the answers you came up with, what's true for you? What resonates with you? What feels good to you in your body? And then the C is just choose the next thing. Choose an action, just one thing, and try it on.
Yeah.
Don't get overwhelmed with everything has to be perfect, but just try one thing. And then the E is embrace extraordinary. If you'll just look for those small moments as you try things on, just look for the extraordinary, ordinary moments and just see if they're out there for you. And I think this is the only way I know how to navigate life now, is just each day kind of just notice and see what it has for you. Because every time I, try to plan something big, that's not how it goes down.
Exactly. That is beautiful. And the embrace part, I think, is so important. Like we said earlier, if you fight change or you live your life hoping things aren't going to change because things are going well or whatever, or they're not going well and you want this specific change to happen, you're going to be disappointed because it's so many of these things are so unexpected. And so it's more, like you said, see them, notice them, see the extraordinary and the ordinary and embrace it. That is an incredibly optimistic and open and great way to live life. So I am agreeing with you with your thesis, and I'll call it an acronym. I think it's beautiful. So your book will be published. I know that you're still working on refinements and all that. That's going to be amazing. But you've also started iChangeCourse, and there's iChangeCourse.com, I believe it is. Can you just talk about that? And if someone's listening and think, wow, Kate's really onto something here, I'd like to dive in and learn more about it. What should they do?
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about it. It's emerging, right? And what I do know is so many people suffer with in resistance to change, right? Whether they chose it or whether it was forced upon them. And so I just, some days I call myself a change artist. Sometimes I'm a change explorer. Sometimes I'm a change architect. But I do want to support people in reimagining, re-envisioning, rebuilding a life in their next chapter, whatever it may be. Next chapter of career, next chapter of relationship. But I feel and think that I have some ideas as I could talk through. So I with the ability to speak, I love speaking to large groups of people, but I also enjoy working with people individually. So consulting or coaching people through whether it's third chapter change or just next chapter change, wherever that is. That's the work I want to do for my social impact, I think, for the rest of my life.
Amazing. And so if I were to go on to iChangeCourse.com, what would I find there and how would I be able to engage in your work?
Yeah, so I would love to work with people individually, so coaching people individually if they would like opportunities. I have a kind of a 6-part coaching series for people to navigate that rebuilding, reimagining, re-envisioning their life. I also would love to get in front of any group. So I'm looking for speaking engagements anywhere, anytime, which would be fantastic. And also working with a couple of companies who are bringing me in to work with people who are doing that kind of end of career transition. So people that are thinking it's time to move on, like I did at Aveson, but a little bit nervous about that. What's next for me?
Sure.
How do I know when is the right time and what to do? And I feel strongly, Bill, that a lot of companies really owe it to their employees who have been loyal to companies for a long time. I think helping people look for that next thing in their life beyond what they've done for 20 or 30 years, I think that is something that helping people go on with dignity, integrity, and optimism about what their life can be. It's just the next chapter, right? So let's throw the word retirement out. Let's just help people rebuild, reimagine, and re-envision.
Amazing. I have a quote here from you that I'd like to wrap things up with because I think it captures a lot of what we just talked about, a lot of who you are. You wrote, "I tap into an innate curiosity that drives me to notice the world around me. I process my experiences through discovery and learning. And where I find love and joy and gratitude, I know one journey is ending and another is about to begin." And so later this year, you're going to wrap up your program at Harvard. You're pulling all this work together. I can't wait to see the impact you have when you go out because your story is so compelling. You tell it so well. And I think you're really onto something. So I know you have a lot on your plate. I'm really grateful. I have a lot of gratitude that you spent this time with me on the podcast. And I can't wait to see what you do next because it's going to be incredible.
Thank you, Bill. I have huge gratitude. And this is going to be my extraordinary, ordinary moment, I think, not only for today, but I think the whole week.
Oh, there you go. All right. Same here. Kate Bean, thank you so much for being on the Blue Sky podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill. Have a great day.
You too. In the writing of a book about her literal journey, Kate Bean tells us that we're all on a metaphoric journey as well, where change is the vehicle and the destination is now. All a good way to frame a mindset that can definitely lead to more resilience and optimism. And once again, we have yet another Blue Sky guest referencing Viktor Frankl. And if you've yet to read Man's Search for Meaning, I encourage you to check it out. It's incredible to see the impact that this one book has had on so many people. And speaking of impact, if you'd like to learn more from Kate Bean, do check out iChangeCourse.com, where you can find out how to take advantage of the services she now provides. I hope you enjoyed this Blue Sky episode with Kate Bean. Before you go, please leave us a rating or a review. And if you like this sort of content, check out the Optimism Institute on social media and go to our website to subscribe to our monthly Blue Sky Weekend newsletter. My special thanks to the team at Sound On Studios for their incredible help with editing and mixing this and all of our Blue Sky episodes. You can learn more about their terrific work at soundonstudios.com. All graphic design and cover art for the Blue Sky podcast and the Optimism Institute are provided by Crush Graphics. That's Crush with a K, if you'd like to check out more of their fantastic work online. Until next time, I'm the founder of the Optimism Institute and host of Blue Sky, Bill Burke, and I thank you for listening.